I'm happy as always to be together with you, even though I would very much prefer to see you in person in the Beis Medrash, as we have done many times in the past in Yerushalayim and in America. These are painful times, even tragic times. So many wonderful people. Oro Besaro Hashemayma, many more are in hospitals, suffering. So this is a time unlike any we have known in our lifetime and many generations before. This is a global pandemic, affected the entire world, but especially our community. And part of the pain is the fact that yeshivas are closed, both the knesios are closed. Erev Rosh Chodesh. Erev Rosh Chodesh in my shul, we learned Vayachal. We had a minyan that fasted. We said Yom Kippur Kotten. And I said goodbye to the shul with tears. It's hard to say goodbye to a friend. Tears your heart saying goodbye to a shul, to a Mokum Torah. For 23 years, I've been davening every day and teaching Torah every day in this shul, and it's closed. 2 weeks ago, when it became obvious to me that too many doctors are either ill or in isolation, I closed the shul in Shaarei Tzedek because patients were getting infected and medical staff was getting infected. Professor Ofer Marin was the new general director of Shaarei Tzedek, a very special doctor, and he's working day and night to save people. And he told me when they closed the shul, a nurse approached him with tears and asked him, please leave on the light in shul. Please, the lights should be on. Painful enough to see closed shuls, at least they shouldn't be dark. And I cried when he told me the story. So we're not in our shuls, but let us hope that the light of our shuls and the Oyer HaTorah and the light that emanates from our shuls and yeshivas should light up our homes, should light up the skies, the heavens, and should go up to the Kisei HaKavod. And Misha Omer La'olam Dai, Yomer Tzoroseinu Dai. So this is a painful time, and I'm choking right now as I talk to you. So let us hope that we will once again have the privilege and the opportunity to come together in both the knesios and both the midrashos and shuls and yeshivas and teach Torah in the way we've been teaching Torah for thousands of years, since the days of Avraham Avinu, Zokan B'Yoshev B'Yeshiva. But for the time being, Baruch Hashem, we could harness technology to enhance our Batzis Torah. Baruch Hashem, we can take advantage of modern technology to teach and to guide. So before delving into the Amkus of Torah, let me just wish all of you, Haim, Uneshayim, Ubnayim, Ubneseim, you should all be well. V'kol choylei amoy beis Yisrael, HaKadosh Baruch Hu should send a refuah shalema, and we should only be mevasa b'seres tovos. So my dear friend Rabbi Gottesman suggested that I once again be paseach this virtual Yarchei Kallah, and I've been quite busy these days. You might imagine I don't give any shiurim in shuls and yeshivas and kollel, I have more time, I have less time. I've been giving shiurim using modern technology and answering shailas from the entire world day and night. Tzarcha amchi yisrael merubim, halachic questions and other, personal questions and dilemmas. Kadosh Baruch Hu should all give us koyach to serve. It's the greatest source, just to be able to serve. So I understand this Yarchei Kallah is dedicated to the halachas of the Leil Seder, and I have to choose a sugya. Well, I think the neshama of a Leil Seder is Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim. The other mitzvahs are just as important, but the spirit and the soul and the neshama of Leil Seder is the mitzvah of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim. So this year, let us hope HaKadosh Baruch Hu will make Nisan and Aflois. But B'derech HaTeva, it'll be somewhat a subdued Seder. Every year I have a big family. Most of my children come together and I have 20 Einiklach or somewhat. This year I'll have one couple and 2 little children. We'll try to rejoice and be happy. How could we be happy until the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim, when so many of our dear friends are in hospitals, some of them are dying, litzarenu. So a story I related many times, Shabbos HaGadol and Pesach, was a story my father told me countless times. He was together with the great Kloiser Rebbe. Pesach, in those terrible days of the Holocaust. And when Pesach approached a month or 2 before, the Kloiser Rebbe was worried, where will we take matzahs? What will we do with matzahs? B'derech Neis, it was miraculous, but the Allied Air Forces bombed a train and close to where they were, and a great quantity of grain was dispersed of Pnei HaSoda. And when they came back from work, every day they brought home a few kernels, which they managed to conceal in the shmatas that they wore. And Erev Pesach, the Kloiser Rebbe with 2 or 3 people took some rocks, crushed those kernels of grain, and took some water, and they made matzahs. They put on a fire. I very much doubt that those matzahs would get any reliable hechsher, not only whether it's the Eida Charedis or the OU or any other decent hechsher, but it's no doubt in my mind that the nachas ruach that HaKadosh Baruch Hu had from those matzahs is unparalleled, and we could never cause such a nachas ruach with the most expensive matzahs with the best hechsher, Taneh, Rishon, Rachayim, Shliad, and all the other chumras. And the question which always occurred to me in those dire circumstances, in those horrific circumstances of the Holocaust, what did they have in mind? Thanking HaKadosh Baruch Hu for Yetziat Mitzrayim when they were in such a tragic situation, probably maybe even worse than in Golos Mitzrayim. So in Agodah of Pesach Divrei Shaul, the great Gaon Rabbi Yosef Shaul Natan Zan relates a mashal, and that's a mashal that the Shoel HaMeishav Rabbi Yosef Shaul Natan Zan used to tell at his Seder. So the story he told was about a poor man who in a miraculous way, B'derech Nes, was blessed with great riches. And every day on that, every year, when that day came, he called together his neighbors, his friends, his extended family, and he made a Suda Seidayim, and he thanked HaKadosh Baruch Hu for this miracle. Some years transpired, V'agalgal chayza b'yolam, and he lost all his money. And once again, he was poor and desperate. And his children were worried, how would the father respond when that very special day would come? Would he be brokenhearted? Would it drag him down? Would he sink into a depression? And it was a wonder in their eyes a week before that very special day, he called together neighbors, friends, family, invited them to his house. Some of them came, and he sits at the head of the table, and he rejoices and sings. And one of the children says, Abba, Tati, I don't have 4 kashas to ask. It's not Pesach, but I have 1 kasha, which is greater to me than all the 4. And the father says to his son, what's your question? What's bothering you? And the son says to the father, look at the table, Abba. Look at the table. You have nothing to war for. Why did you bring these people together? And you seem to be very happy. Could you share with us, why are you so happy? There's no food at the table. So the father explains to his son, all those years when I was poor, my pain was not about Olam Hazeh. I was pained by the fact that I won't be able to teach my children Torah, and I won't be able to send them to yeshivas, because in Europe 200 years ago, when a family was poor, the children needed to help out with parnasa, and little kids went to work. And that was my pain for all those years, and that was what troubled me. And Baruch Hashem, in those formative years, when you grew up, Kodesh Baruch Hu made an ace. I had enough money to support you and send you to yeshivas to learn Torah. Now that you've grown and you're Talmidei Chachamim, Kodesh Baruch Hu took my money away. And I say, Hashem nosan v'Hashem lokach. It's only money. But the Torah you learned in these years, no galgal achoisa b'yolim could ever take away. That's a kinyan netzach. So the great Shoel Meshav said, by Yetzias Mitzrayim, the Pasuk says, Zelach Weiss ki b'tzeischem mitzrayim tavdu nesu elokim ala harazeh. When we left Eretz Mitzrayim, kirvanu amokim la'avaydosoi, and we received Torah, no one could ever take that away. No one could tear us away from that kinyan netzach. Neither Hitler nor Stalin, no one. And therefore, we always rejoice in Yetzias Mitzrayim, regardless of what our situation is. So the great Kloisenberg Rebbe, Moiri Verabi, and Avi Moiri Zachroinam Rabrocha, yes, they rejoiced in those terrible circumstances. They ate matzah. And they did their best to tell the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim. So let us hope, by the time Pesach comes, we should be able to rejoice with our families and friends. But regardless of what will be, we will tell the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim. So let us learn together. Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim is a mitzvah d'oraisa. What is the source of this mitzvah? The Rambam Perek Zayin Halacha Aleph Hilchos Chometz HaMatzah writes that the source of the mitzvah Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim is the pasuk Zocher es hayoyim hazeh asher yotzoso mimitzrayim. K'moi shenemar Zocher es yoyim hashavos lekadsha. And that is somewhat a strange comparison. There are 6 mitzvahs about Zechira. So what does Zocher es yoyim hashavos lekadsha have in common with Zocher es yoyim asher yotzoso mimitzrayim? Another fundamental question is that Rambam doesn't quote the posuk Laman Tisaper ba'oznei bincha, but rather a posuk that deals with Zechira and not with Sipur. So why does the Rambam compare Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim to Kiddush Hayoim, Zocher es yoyim hashavos lekadsha? The Or Sameach has an interesting comment, and the Or Sameach writes that the Rambam wants to indicate, just like Kiddush, you need to say ala kais. The mitzvah of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim also requires a kais. And this pshat is unreasonable to the extreme, because the Rambam is not yet teaching the details of Leil HaSeder. He is defining a mitzvah d'oraisa. And Minatayra, we definitely don't need a kais, neither by Kiddush, nor by Sipi Yetzias Mitzrayim. So let me share with you my understanding, but that will be in another 15 minutes or so as we move forward in today's shir. So the fundamental question many Achronim deal with is, what is the difference between Sipi Yetzias Mitzrayim b'Leil HaSeder and Zechiras Yetzias Mitzrayim every day and every night? So we learn these two mitzvahs from two different psukim. Zochras Yom Hazeh Sheyetzosam Mitzrayim. That posik is the makor, the source of Sipi Yetzias Mitzrayim b'Leil HaSeder. And Leman Tizkor es Yom Tzeischum Yeretz Mitzrayim Kol Yemei Chayecha. As we say in the Haggadah, and it's a sugya in Masechet Psuchim, Yemei Chayecha El Hayomim, Kol Yemei Chayecha Elo HaLeilos. So every day and every night we have a mitzvah of Zechiras Yetzias Mitzrayim. What is the difference between the two? So if the Rambam would quote the Posek Leman Tesaper, we would say, well, B'Leil HaSeder you need to tell to others all year long, it's between you and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But the Rambam brings the fundamental source of Sipi Yetzias Mitzrayim, Zochar es Hayom Hazeh. And the Mishnah says in Psuchim, Im ein loy ben, shoyel es atzmai. So telling the story to your son or to your children is just a lechatchila. It's not ma'akev. You still have the Sipi Yetzias Mitzrayim even if you're alone. So the fundamental question once again, what is the difference between Zechiras Yetzias Mitzrayim, which is incumbent upon us every day, and Sipi Yetzias Mitzrayim b'Leil HaSeder? The Minchas Chinuch deals with this question, Mitzvah Chof Aleph, and the Minchas Chinuch does say the difference is it to yourself or to others? But as I explained, no, I don't think that's enough, because it is clear in the Mishnah and the Gemara that you're Yarchei, even if you don't tell others, even if you're alone, and especially if the Rambam brings the basic source, is a posuk of Zechira. Eimek Brocha, Rab Aryeh Pomeranchik, one of the Choshavs, the Talmidim of the Briskerov, who was an amazing Ilu. He passed away very, very young. So in his Sefer Eimek Brocha, he brings what he heard from the Briskerov in the name of his great father, Reb Chaim Brisker. So Reb Chaim said there are three differences between Sipi Yetzias Mitzrayim and Zechiras Yetzias Mitzrayim. Number one, Shala v'tshuva. B'Leil HaSeder, the way we tell the story is derech Shala v'tshuva. And that is why Kana ben Shoyel, Manishtanu Ha'Lilah Hazeh. And as a response to his questions, we tell the story of Sipo Yetzias Mitzrayim. The second afkaman is Matchel B'Gnusul Mitzrayim B'Shvach. This is not a halacha that we find by Zechiras Yetzias Mitzrayim, only by Sipo. And I'm talking Kufta Zayin Umedarav, there's a machlokes Rav and Shmuel, what Gnis and what Shvach. And the third nafkamina is Kol Shalei Omer Shloisha Devorim Elu Lo Yotzo Yedei Chayvosan. So B'Leil HaSeder we need to relate to the mitzvahs and explain why do we eat Pesach, Matzah, and Morah. Because this Yesod is not found in Reb Chaim or Rambam, I take the liberty to give another interpretation of what Reb Chaim was talking about. So this Chiddush comes to us Eid Mepi Eid, Reb Aryeh Pomeranchik from the Briskerov, from Reb Chaim. And Lanias Daiti, no, that's not an answer to our question. Because all these three halachas, Pesach, Matzah, Morah, Matchel, B'Gnusul Mitzrayim, B'Shvach, Shala, v'Tshuva, are only midrabanan. Min HaTorah, the Rambam clearly defines the mitzvah. Mitzvah Seishal Torah L'Saper, B'Nisim and Afor, Shenasa L'Vaseinu, B'Leil Tezvov, B'Nisim, that's the Rambam in the beginning of Perek Zayin, Mehelchas Chometz HaMatzah. All these three halachas, quoted by the Briskerov in the name of Reb Chaim, are just Tkonas Anshe Knesses HaGedolah in mitzvahs ha'agoda. They're not min HaTorah. And therefore the question still stands. Men HaTorah, ma bein schira l'sipor, ma bein mitzvahs leil haseder, the mitzvahs schira every morning and every evening. So what did Reb Chaim have in mind? What did he say? Lani is daiki. That's my understanding. Reb Chaim came to define what is the ikar mitzvah of Haggadah, not the mitzvah d'oraisa of Yציאת מצרים, but rather the mitzvah d'Rabbanan of Haggadah shel Pesach, shetiknu anshe knesses hagdolah. What are the fundamentals of the Haggadah? And if that is the question, Reb Chaim's response is precise, miduyak. These are the most fundamental yesodis of Haggadah shel Pesach. So many years ago, I don't remember when, but it was a time either leading to a war or amidst of a war in Eretz Yisrael. And I was asked by soldiers in active duty, also by doctors and nurses in emergency rooms, if they have just a few minutes to dedicate to the Leila Seder. What's the Seder HaKadima, Mukdam v'Ma'uchar? What's more important, what's less important? And I wrote a lengthy tshuva about this. So regarding Haggadah, I wrote, the most important part of the Haggadah is Manishtano Avodah Meyinu, Shala v'Tshuva, Matchel b'Dinus u'Mesayim b'Shvach, and Rabbi Gamliel, Kol Shelo Yom Shloishet Dvorim Elo, Vayotzi Yedei Chavosa. And that is exactly what I understand Reb Chaim meant. But that is not an answer on the question we are dealing with, because this is midrabanan. These yesodis refer to mitzvahs ha'Haggadah shetiknu anshe knesses hagdolah. But min HaTorah, what's the difference between schira and sipor? I agree with the Emek Brocha, at least on one point. And that point is three nafkaminas. There are three differences between sipor, B'leil Seder, and schira all year round, but three different ones, not the same. And let me explain. I think there's a fundamental difference between schira and sipor. And because this sheet is given in English, I will use the English language. There's a difference mentioning something and telling a story. So let me give you a mashal. Kallah, the little baby, can't fall asleep, but his mother usually tells him a story every night. He should fall asleep. And it happens to be that mommy is very, very busy. And she asks Tati, could you sit next to Yankala's bed and tell him a story? And Yankee is so happy, Daddy is coming to tell him a story. So the father sits down next to his bed and he says, oh, a story. 20 years before you were born, we moved from America to Eretz Yisrael. Yankala looks up at his father and he says, Abba, that's not a story. Tell me a story. So the father says, when we arrived to Eretz Yisrael, we lived in Yerushalayim. And once again, quiet. Yankala cries, Mommy, could you tell me a story? So the mother sits down next to Yankala's bed and tells him, you know, I remember more than 20 years ago, Abba once came home from shul with a crazy idea, and he tells me, I think we should move to Eretz Yisrael. And I asked him why. And he tells me, because in Eretz Yisrael there is so much Torah and so many yeshivas and so many gedolim, and Mrs. Eretz Yisrael is such a great mitzvah. And I agreed. And then we started packing up, and it took us 4 weeks to pack. And I remember when we went to the airport, and you got on the plane. Oh, he wasn't born yet, I apologize. We got on the plane, and we came to Eretz Yisrael, and we contemplated where to live. After 5 minutes, Yankala is fast asleep. That is the difference between schira and sipor. So in the midst of schira Yציאת מצרים every morning and every evening, we don't relate to details. We just say, Yetzanu me'Mitzrayim, and that's enough. HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yitzor me'Mitzrayim. There's a Gemara in Pesachim Kuf Yud Zayin, Tzorech Lahaski Yציאת מצrayim B'Kiddush Hayon. When you say Kiddush, you need to mention Yציאת מצrayim. How do we do that? 3 words. Zeichel Yetzias Mitzrayim. That is the midst of schira. Sipor, by its very nature, demands detail. So even though the mitzvah is Zocher es hayoim hazeh, but if you don't go into details, you're not mekayim the mitzvah. Just by saying, Zecher Yetzias Mitzrayim, that's not enough. So maybe some of you will be aware of the Pri Chodesh and the Abu Darham. They ask, why don't we say a broch on Sipi Yetzias Mitzrayim? And they say, because we're Yotzei with Kiddush. I have a different pshat in that Abu Darham, but we don't have time for that tonight. So the first chilek between Sipi Yetzias Mitzrayim and Schir every day and every night is detail. Not only detail, also what details. So the Rambam says, you need to emphasize that we left Mitzrayim b'nisim v'neflois. It was miraculous. It was l'mala m'derech hateva. And if you don't relate to nisim v'neflois, you're not yotzei. So a wonderful Jewish kid goes to Sunday school. L'tzarenu, not all Jewish children have a proper Yiddish chinuch. And B'leil HaSeder, his father says, so what did they teach you in school about Yetzias Mitzrayim? And he says, the Jews many years ago were slaves in a country that was not democratic at all. It was a totalitarian regime. And the leader of Egypt was cruel and brutal. And he led his country with an iron fist. And after hundreds of years of slavery, the Jews produced a young, dynamic leader, and his name was Moshe. And he was successful in giving the people hope and motivation and giving them courage. And he organized a rebellion, and he goes on and on. Every word that child said is true. Parai was in no way a liberal leader. He was a dictator, and he was cruel and brutal, and Moshe obviously was a dynamic leader, and he did instill in the hearts of people hope and motivation. Everything he said is true, but it's dvorim b'teilim, and they weren't mekayim the mitzvah of Sipi Yetzias Mitzrayim, because the Rambam clearly says mitzvah seishel Torah l'saper b'nisim v'neflois shenasu l'avosenu. It's all about miracles, and the Ramban at the end of Parshas Bo explains why it's all about miracles, because as the Ramban says at the end of Parshas Bo. So that is the first nafkamina, the first difference between Sipor, B'leil HaSeder, and Schira all year round. Detail. And what details? Nisim v'neflois. That's all what Sipi Yetzias Mitzrayim is about. It's about Nisim v'neflois. It's about the Munah v'betochen. It's about believing that HaKadosh Baruch Hu controls the world. Which nisim, which neflois, menatoira, whatever you choose. Whatever you choose. The nusach of the Agodah is midrabanan. But you're not yotzei the mitzvah unless you relate to details and details of nisim and neflois. Number two, there's a difference in the wording between these two psukim. That is schir every day and every night. Zocher es hayoim hazeh asher yatzoso mimitzrayim. Remember this day. And I think B'leil HaSeder we need to emphasize not only that HaKadosh Baruch Hu took us out of Mitzrayim and Nisim v'neflois, but this is the day. It happened today. That is ma'akev. And that is what the Rambam means when he writes, Mitzvah seishel Torah l'saper b'nisim v'neflois shenasu l'avosenu b'leil tesvav. And that is the kavanah of the Rambam, k'mo shenemar, zochres yom Shabbos l'kadshay. Because of all the shesh schiras, there are only two in which we need to remember the day, not only the event. Not only what happened, but when it happened. Schiras Masa Amorek, we don't know when it happened. It is only by two mitzvahs that it is important to emphasize not only what happened, but when. And that is Shabbos. Shabbos, Shabbos is about emphasizing This is Shabbos Kodesh Shabbos Shabbos HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Mekol Malachti Asher Oso. And it's the same, the Leila Seder. So when this became clear to me, I remember many years ago, I asked myself, but where is it in Haggadah Shel Pesach that we emphasize the day? In Halacha Beis Perek Zayin, we find the shortest version of Yetziat Mitzrayim. The Rambam writes that it's a mitzvah to relate the story to your child. Im hoyu ben kotano tipesh oimaloi. Avodah mayinu b'Mitzrayim kamo yevet zeh kamo shivcha zo ubelayla hazeh podu isanu HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's the shortest version we have anywhere. What's in it? Belayla hazeh podu isanu HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So where do we say in the Haggadah that this is the day? I think it's a Milzah de Pshita. The child asks, Manishtanu alaylo hazeh, makor alaylos. And we say Avodah Mayinu. So it's obvious that we mean to say Avodah Mayinu, v'Kodesh Baruch Hu osiyenu l'cheres b'layla hazeh, because if that is not our intention, the child will ask once again, Abba, you didn't listen. You didn't answer my question. Manishtanu alaylo hazeh, makor alaylos. So obviously when we say Avodah Mayinu v'Kodesh Baruch Hu osiyenu l'cheres, we mean b'layla hazeh. And that is the second nafka mina between Leila Seder and Schira all year. And I think it's a pshat amiti v'niflo in the Rambam. What does he compare? Zocheres Yom Shabbos v'Kadshoi to Zocheres Yom Hazeh Asher Yetzosa Mitzrayim. Nafka mina number 3 is not what we need to say, but how we need to say it. So in Brochas Tezvav Amedalef regarding Kriya Shema, we find the machlokes of Yossi v'Chachamim. According to the Yossi, Shema Yisrael tzorech lashmiya la'oznav. Chachamim say no. Shema is b'koloshen shatu shemea. Tzorech la'itzi b'svosav. Ein tzorech la'ashmiya la'oznav. Halacha k'Chachamim. And I think that is correct by Kriya Shema and all the other mitzvahs Shabbat, excluding Yetziat Mitzrayim. Yes, you could be Mekayim the mitzvah even Beinu leben Atzmai, but it still needs to be B'derech Sipur. And if no one could hear, that cannot be defined as Sipur. It's not a story if no one could hear. So preferably, lechatchil, you need to relate the story to your son or to someone else, but you're Mekayim the mitzvah even if you're alone. But it needs to be b'derech sipur. And sipur needs to be audible. If no one can hear, that's not sipur. So in Siman Tofai Daled, there's a fascinating machlokes between the Prima Godim and Reb Shlomo Kluger. The Prima Godim is in 2 different sources, and Reb Shlomo Kluger is in 2 different sources. Prima Godim Tofai Daled, Mishbitz Zov Siv Kotnalef, and once again, in the introduction of the Prima Godim to Hilchos Kriya Shema, the Prima Godim says, according to Ravina in Brochas Daf Chav, Hirur Kedibur V'Kol HaTorah Kula, Hirur Kedibur is also sufficient by Yetziat Mitzrayim. Reb Shlomo Kluger, in his Hagos on the Prima Godim, and in Tshuvas U'Erav Rosh Shlomo Orachaim Hashmot Siman Mem, Shlomo Kluger disagrees, and he says, Hirur could be Kedibur, but Hirur could never be Kesipur. Because how would another person know what you have in your heart, what you're thinking in your mind? So therefore, Hirur, even according to Ravina, Hirur Kedibur, it can be Kesipur. And I wonder, so why would the Prima Godim and Reb Shlomo Kluger have a machlokes if it's not Nogea L'Maisa anyway? Because we ein halacha Ravina, Hirur Lav Kedibur. But I think the same machlokes is Nogea Halacha L'Maisa Mamish. Because, in my opinion, Shoimeya, and if he doesn't hear, if he can't hear, if no one can hear, that cannot be defined as Sipur. And therefore, I think, even though Lagabi Kriya Shema v'Kol Shara Mitzvahs, Ein Tzorech Lashmiya La'oznav, all is needed is Tzorech Lo'itzi B'svosav, regarding Yetziat Mitzrayim, Tzorech Lashmiya La'oznav. And this is Nogea Halacha L'Maisa sometimes, because in the days of Chazal, And even throughout the ages, many Gedolim had the minhag in their homes that only the father or the person that leads the Seder said out loud, and all the others were Yoitz al Yidei Shmir. But the common minhag nowadays is each and every family member says that Agod on his own. And sometimes, especially the girls, Kol Kvuda Bas Melech Pnimon, and because of Tznius, especially when there are guests around the table, the girls will say, and the women would say the Haggadah with a very low voice. And I think if they're mechavan to be yoitza with the father, that's okay. But to be yoitza al yidei shmiya, tzorech kavon shomea v'kavonas mashmiya, otherwise you can't be yoitza. And if you want to be yoitza on your own, tzorech lashmiya la'aznav. That doesn't mean you need to shout out loud, but needs to be audible. And an ein yochal lashmiya la'aznav, then I think you can be yoitza the mitzvah. Sipu Yitzias Mitzrayim. So those are the three nafkamins. And Chazal teach us, Kol Amar B'Lasapar Areza Meshubach. We do not find Kol Amar B'Lahazkir Areza Meshubach. And this, once again, brings us to the fundamental yesod I said a few minutes ago. Sipur is about details. Sipur is about Nisim and Aflois. So, Sipu Yitzias Mitzrayim and Schias Mitzias Mitzrayim. Remembering Yitzias Mitzrayim has two goals, two objectives. One is Kabbalah Sod Malchus Shemayim. Almanas Kenu Yitzasicha Miyeretz Mitzrayim Shetekablu Malchusi Aleichem Shetekaimu Mitzvoisai. The other goal is Amunah V'Betochen, as I quoted the Ramban at the end of Parshas Boy. So I think Schiras Yitzias Mitzrayim every day is part of Kabbalah Sod Malchus Shemayim, and that is why it comes together with Kriyas Shema, where we mekayim the mitzvah of Schiras Yitzias Mitzrayim, Parasha Gimel Shel Kriyas Shema v'Berachos Kriyas Shema, because it's essentially about Kabbalah Sod Malchus Shemayim, and therefore there's no need to go into details. Kodesh Baruch Hu took us out of Mitzrayim shetekablu malchusi aleichem, but Sipu Yitzias Mitzrayim is more about Emunah v'Betochen, and that is why we say Hallel b'Leil HaSeder. And that is why it is only when you relate to details that you could develop the feeling b'chol doyer v'doyer. Chayav odem liras es atzma ki'ilu yotzo miMitzrayim. So this is the most fundamental yesod. And according to the Rambam, it's not only in Sipu Yitzias Mitzrayim, it has significance to all the mitzvahs. And the Rambam writes, בכל דור ודור חייב ולרס עצמה כאילו יהיו עצמה יוצא ממצרים ולפיכך כשסויד אודם בלילה הזה צריך לאכול ולשתות והוא בהסבה. So the Rambam teaches us that Heseva is part of Chayev Odam Leres Atzmai Ki'ilu Yotzo Mitzrayim. So when we sit B'Leil HaSeder, it needs to be personal. We need to try to feel as if we were there, we suffered, we bled, and Kodesh Baruch Hu took us, not our forefathers. It's not about nostalgia. It's not about remembering distant memories. It needs to be personal. Kelohu Yotzo miMitzrayim. There's a gewaltige chiddush in Keren LeDavid. The Keren LeDavid was Satmar HaRav. Wow, Satmar HaRav wasn't a Gaon Tzaddik, the great Tzaddik, the unbelievable Gadol. Rabbi Yoelish, wasn't he Satmar HaRav yet? Many years before the Satmar HaRav we all know from America. Rabbi Eliezer David Greenwald, the younger brother of the Arugis Aboisim, was Rav in Satmar. And his former Keren LeDavid. Very chashuv shalas atshuvas. Keren LeDavid Moyadim, he writes that part of the mitzvah of Sipu Yitzias Mitzrayim is to relate your own personal hatzolah, your personal miracles, your personal salvation. And therefore, B'Leila said that a person should share with his family what he's been through, he and his forefathers. And I find that to be a gewaldige chiddush. Does this have any source? Isn't it clear that the mitzvah of Yetzias Mitzrayim is about Yetzias Mitzrayim and nothing else? Mitzvah Seishal Torah L'Sapa B'Nisim V'Naflois. However, when Chazal say, "B'Kol Dori V'Dorach Ha'avod U'B'Ris Asm Kilehu Yosef Mitzrayim," that seems to be somewhat of an extension of Yetzias Mitzrayim, but still, no. I think it's still about Yetzias Mitzrayim. You just need to imagine that you were there, or Mitzrayim is here, and it's about you. When Chazal but it's still about Yetzias Mitzrayim. So in Minchas Osher, Mesechet Psochim, Haggadah Shel Pesach, third volume, Minchas Osher Moyadim. It's in print right now. It should have been in the markets, but just because of this pandemic, everything came to a standstill. So these forum are under the printing presses. I hope HaRav they should let me out for Pesach, the third volume, Minchas Osher Moyadim, which is Pesach Tzvias Roim, and is expected very shortly. And I wrote a great deal about these sugyas, especially in the new Sefer, which is expected out. When Chazal say, that includes everything that is associated, even remotely, with Yetzias Mitzrayim. The Tosefta says that the Zekainim were sitting Koloisi Halilah Vayoiskim Be'ilchas HaPesach. In the Haggadah we say Vayoiskim B'Yetzias Mitzrayim. So I explained that Hilchas HaPesach, you cannot be Yoitze B'Yetzias Mitzrayim, but you are Yoitze Kol Amar Ben Esaper. We have 1,000 Haggadahs, maybe 10,000 Haggadahs, and most of them are Pilpul, Drush, Agada, Musar, and most of those things were what Gedolei Yisrael said at their Seder. And I always wondered, what does that have to do with Yetzias Mitzrayim? The Rambam writes, I think we should be spending more time telling the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim. Learn the Midrashim, learn something about the Nisim of Yetzias Mitzrayim. But obviously, Gedolim of every camp. We have a goddess from Hasidish Rabbeim, from Litvish Shivas, from Sfardish, from everyone. And they all said Drushim and Parparois. And therefore it is clear to me, it is all included in Kol Amar B'Saper Areisa Mishubach. Kol Amar B'Saper is more inclusive than Nisim V'Nefloi. So obviously it's a long night. A long and magnificent night. So whatever you do to enhance the night, besimcha, behislavos, behisrakshas, is included in Kol Amar B'Saper, but I still think it must be associated with Yetzias Mitzrayim. Is there any source to substantiate what the Keren LeDavid says? Well, V'hi she'om dolav aseinu v'lono. And that is not about Yetzias Mitzrayim. It's about the trials and tribulations and the suffering of every generation. So why is it in the Haggadah? So obviously, when our hearts overflow with Halal and Haidoyah, there's also room to thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu for the Nisim and the Flois that are with us in every generation. But I still think that is only that sola of Klal Yisrael. Telling your personal story still is a big chiddush to me. So maybe this is a machlokes Rav and Shmuel. The Abu Darham on Haggadah Shel Pesach has an interesting interpretation. What's the machlokes Rav and Shmuel? Psocham Kuf Dezayir Oved Aleph. Matchel begnis u'Mesayim b'Shvach. Which gnis, which Shvach? Rav says, Metchila oiv d'avodah zorah ha'yaveseinu, v'karvani amukum l'aved nosei. Shmuel says, no, avodah me'yinu v'akodesh baruch hu tziyenu v'cheres. Abu Darham explains, why does Shmuel disagree with Rav? Metchila oiv d'avodah zorah ha'yaveseinu, what does it have to do with Yetzias Mitzrayim? That's Shmuel's argument. What does Rav say? Rav says, yeah, doesn't have directly to do with Yetzias Mitzrayim, but still, in a way, our Ovis were over the Vedasora, and we thank Shekadosh Baruch Hu Kirvano Lavedasam. If not for the Buddha, I would say Kadosh Baruch Hu Kirvano Lavedasam is not only in the days of Avraham Avinu, but once again by Yetzias Mitzrayim. But anyway, the Abu Dharam explains that is the Machlokes Rav and Shmuel. Is there a point in Gnus V'Shvach that's not directly associated with Yetzias Mitzrayim? Achim Yekorim, my dear friends, this is going to be a very special Seder, a very different Seder. Somewhat subdued. I don't want to say sad. Chas v'sholom. Shall not be a sad Seder. There's a mitzvah of Simchas Yom Tov. And we all need to be mischazik, b'yamunah v'b'tochen, and believe Kodesh Baruch Hu always loves us. He is always with us. His chasadim are with us, and his nisim v'neflois are with us. So when we come together, b'leil Seder, let us dance and sing and rejoice and say Halal b'kol levav from the depths of our hearts. Thank you, Kodesh Baruch Hu, for his chasudim. Moed alawave v'tzoyek alo osi. Not only mevakesh. Many people mistakenly quote mevakesh. The lashon of Chazal is tzoyek alo osad. Let us cry out to our Kodesh Baruch Hu. Habeit mishum mayim re'ei. Look at these wonderful people, so much chesed. And I'm so inspired from those hundreds and thousands of Jewish doctors that put their life in jeopardy, and all those Hatzalah members, putting everything aside, their own safety aside, and just trying to help and save and salvage. And let us try being confined to our homes, to learn a lot, and to daven a lot. Use every spare moment to say Tehillim. Many times I explained in Eretz Yisrael. People ask me, do I have a sgula? Do I have a sgula against Megafis? We are a generation that loves sgulas. However, the stranger the sgulas are, the more appeal they have to us, and we must understand that the real sgulas are the ones that we find in Chazal. So there are three sgulas to be saved from Megafis. Meya brochas b'kol yom. Actually, it's a halacha menochas mem gimel amid beis, but the Turan Simon mem Bov quotes that up. Nutrenai goin. Then in the days of David HaMelech, there was a terrible Megaifa, a plague, and 100 people perished every day. And David nisgaraloi beruach hakodesh that the solution is Meya brochas. And when they started saying Meya brochas b'kol yom, the Megaifa was over. That's good number one. So the Beis Yosef and Simon Vov has a clear list. What are the Meya Brochas? Go through that list. And if you're missing out, especially now that we don't have minyanim, fill in with Berchas and Nayanim. Number two, K'toiris. Try to say Pashas K'toiris every day. Rabbi Kiva Eger Tov Kuf Tzadik Aleph wrote a letter to his Talmud, Rabbi Yoel Gutmacher. There was a plague of cholera in Europe. And Rabbi Kiva Eger writes, they should say K'toiris every day. He doesn't quote a source, but the source is a Zohar and Bereshis Kufa Amud Beis. It is a Shrikit Eliyahu Hanavi was Megala to Rav Pinchas. Hochel HaNegef v'yoyim Moishel Aaron Kachas HaMachto v'simol K'toiris v'tiyotzer HaMegefo. Segula number two. Number three, say Akedas Yitzchak. That is also a Zohar. Tekune Zohar, Tekune Tinyona. The Zohar says, no carbon is as powerful to stop a Megafin as a Kedas Yitzchak. La'orech HaGolus. So let us try to say K'toiris every day, say the Aked every day, be makbet the same Meya Brochas. And most important, Shuvet Tvila V'tzedakah Maviren Es Roya HaGzeiro. We should only know Simcha and Nachas in Akusha and Freilich and Yom Tov to all of you, Kol Tov.